What's up, gangsters? Time for another 10 minutes of technique video. Well, 10 minutes or a little more. I haven't done very good at actually hitting the 10-minute mark so far, but hey, it's the thought that counts, right? Anyway, this is going to be all about dealing with a very poorly fitting wing landing light. So let's get to it. Okay, so here is what the problem is. Like basically every piece of clear plastic that fits into this 1/48 Accurate Miniatures B25 Mitchell kit, the fit of these landing lights is pretty terrible. Let me zoom in a little bit there so that you can see exactly what I mean. This is a case of very poor engineering because there's not a positive locator that tells you for certain that you've got it in the correct way. But I can also tell you that in this case it doesn't matter, because no matter how you put these in there, they just don't fit well. And you can see that it sticks out on one side, even though it's nestled down into the notch pretty thoroughly. And on the bottom here, you can see that it has that it sits below the surface of the airfoil. So this has multiple fit issues, and it's true on both wings. And I ran into this when I did my first Accurate Miniatures Mitchell kit as well. It just is what it is. It would have been nice if they had engineered this so that this entire landing light was an insert that went in and fit around these panel lines. Hopefully I can keep this camera focused when I've got it zoomed in like this. Anyway, you can see there's some panel lines there that would have made nice joints for a kind of a square piece that included the landing light lens, but they didn't do it that way. It is what it is, and we've got to deal with it. So here is the plan. I am going to fill around the edges of this and on top of it, right here, where it sits below the surface, with UV curing glue. Now this is commonly known as Bondic. That's one of the most popular commercial brands. This is some stuff that I got from a fly tying supply place, where I got a super good deal on 2 bottles of it. There's a normal viscosity that's a lot like Bondic, and then this thin stuff that's not as thin as like thin super glue, but still flows fairly well. And they sent me this spiffy UV flashlight to go with it for curing it. And I like it a lot better than the Bondic, largely because this light is so much bigger and easier to use. So anyway, I've done this before using 5-minute epoxy, and that works fine too, because it mostly dries clear. But it takes 5 minutes to cure, and it's not as hard, I find, as Bondic. Now, the fact that Bondic does cure so hard is the reason why I normally would not recommend it as a filler, because it's a bitch to sand. But because of this being out here on the leading edge of this wing, where everything is really easy to get to, I am able to use one of my favorite finishing tools, which is my 6-inch mil bastard file, which is super sharp, and I'll be able to get all the way around that to shape it once I've done the filling. Now obviously I'm not going to do all that real time, because that just takes way too much time, and it would never fit inside of 10 minutes. So I'm going to do it and show you the results of each step as I go, and hopefully that will be effective. Okay, so I've gone ahead and applied the UV glue. And what I've tried to do when I fitted both of these lenses in is I tried to make it where the worst of it was on the bottom, obviously, because that will show less. So you can see on this one, it's pretty nice on top, relatively flush. And then I've piled on some of the UV cement on the bottom. Hopefully you can see that. There we go. And I spread it all the way across there because, again, it's low and I had to fill that in. Now, one of our good contributors on Scale Modelers Critique Group is a guy named Mark Casiglia, and he's a dentist from Australia, and he advised us that these UV curing glues actually do not like to cure with the presence of oxygen. And so what happens is that when you've got it on here and you're curing it with the light, that there will always be a layer that doesn't completely cure on the outside of it, and so it may stay a little bit sticky. Some of them seem to do it more than others. But what he advised is to smear something like Vaseline or something over the top of it and then shine the cure light on it again to make sure that there's no oxygen touching the surface of the UV glue, and it cures completely. And so what I'm doing is I just take a little spit and wipe it on there and then cure it again, and that seems to do a fairly good job. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get after this with a file and start smoothing it down. Okay, I've filed both of these down and I think got them blended in pretty well. And what I'm going to do now is get after it with a 400 grit sanding stick and then an 800 grit sanding stick and see how it looks. And then I may go straight to polishing it. You can see that the UV glue shows up there. It doesn't blend in perfectly at this stage. And I've found that's true with epoxy as well. It's never going to feather perfectly there because they're dissimilar materials. So, hopefully that all will work itself out when I polish it. It did with epoxy on my other one. One thing you also have to be on top of when you're using a file to do this kind of work is keeping your file clean so that you don't get gouges as you work. So you can see I'm constantly wiping my file off on my sleeve to keep those teeth clean. Okay, so I wet sanded it with 400 and then 800 grit UMP thinny sticks, which are two of my very favorite things, as you guys probably know if you've ever watched any of my other stuff. And you can see how it's starting to look. It's getting pretty well cleaned up and blended in. So now what I'm going to do is go after it with a buffer, and that'll get me to the point where I'm ready to actually polish it. Okay, so a quick hit with the buffer, and that's where it is right there. Now you could go ahead and polish this out by hand using normal polishing cloths and polishing compounds, but I like to use power tools, and so I'm going to get after it with my Proxon and these little Dremel yellow cloth polishing wheels and some Zam, which is my favorite polishing compound for clear plastic. And all you do is just load that wheel up like that, and I'm spinning this thing at, I don't know, whatever it's set to. Set at 7 out of 20, so not super fast, but still pretty zippy. And watch how quickly this comes up. Just like that. Boom. Super clear. Okay, so there it is, done. I can give you a good close look at that, and I think you can appreciate how nice and clear that came out. I mean, that's about as good as it's ever going to get with a piece that fits so poorly. There is a dividing line between where the polystyrene is and where the UV glue is. And you can see it right there, but it's pretty slight, and you have to really be looking at it in the right angle. And again, that's why I put that on the bottom. But again, that's just about as good as it's going to get in a situation like this. This basic process of sanding and polishing a clear piece to get it to look right is something that you can do on pretty much any clear piece. You can see I've had to do it on basically all of the side windows on the fuselage of this silly thing because every single one of them stuck out proud from the surface of the fuselage. So I had to file and sand every single one of them and polish them down using this same process that I've showed you here. So you can see it's pretty simple, pretty effective, and nothing at all to be afraid of. So there you go. I hope you found that useful. I'm sure you know this is not an uncommon problem with aircraft models, so I hope you'll be able to make use of this technique at your own workbench. And as always, I definitely appreciate you watching. Much love.